Hey, what's up? John Sonmez from SimpleProgrammer.com. So I've got a few requests for a story about what happened after my first job. So I did a video, and I'll put it here, about my first job experience, and in that video I talk about how I was basically underqualified for this job, and I got this job, and it was kind of a dream job at 19. And so a lot of you were asking, well, what happened after that? Did you ever get a real programming job? Did you ever learn to program? And yes, I did, but I'll kind of give you the story. And there's really no point to this, but just a lot of people have asked, so maybe I'll find a point. Maybe you can find some meaning in it. But if you're curious, here's what happened. So after that job, if you watch the video, you'll know that I got laid off from that job. I really wasn't qualified for that job, and I was trying to find another job, and I could not. I was having a lot of difficulty finding another job because when you're not qualified for the first job and you have very high expectations, it just doesn't work out. And so my specialty was in printer languages. There was a few companies, they were really interested when they heard I was specializing in printer languages. I had printer experience, but the problem was that I wasn't very skilled. I didn't know a lot of programming. I didn't really know C++. When I'd go to an interview, I went to a few interviews, I remember, and I just didn't do very well because I didn't really know my stuff that well. And so anyway, what ended up happening was I ended up finding this job. I had interviewed for this job in Phoenix, Arizona. I was in Santa Monica, California before then. I moved to Phoenix, Arizona, got this big U-Haul. My wife, who was my fiance at the time, came with me. We loaded everything up and we went to Phoenix. We drove. In fact, it was kind of a crazy story when we're both kind of like very got to get things done. We don't like things hanging over our head type of people. So we had packed up, I think, the U-Haul, and we were planning on going the next day to drive down there. And it was like 2 a.m. in the morning, and we had just finished packing everything up, and we're like, should we just go now? Like, why waste the time? So at like 2 a.m., we set out on this, I don't know, it's not that far of a drive, maybe it's like 6 hours or so. I forget how long from LA essentially to Phoenix. But we drove, I was driving the U-Haul, my fiance at the time was following me in the car, and it was dark, and we were going along these mountain passes, and I had our cat in like this carrying case, this box, and it was just screaming the whole time, and it was crazy. And I'm looking in the rearview mirror to see if she's still following me, if we got lost, and yeah, it was pretty crazy. But anyway, we got there, we got to Phoenix, and I got this job at this company called NetCharge, and they're this startup company that was in the financial industry, doing this pretty cool thing with business to business payment processing. And at that point I got serious because I realized that I was lucky to get that job, honestly, and it didn't pay as much as the first job. I think this job ended up paying like $50 an hour, something around that. It was still a lot of money, right? Don't get me wrong. I don't mean to make little of this. I was like 20 at the time, 21, somewhere around there, and this was still a lot of money. But I realized now the opportunity, I wasn't going to waste this. So I really worked as hard as I could, honestly, to develop my skills and to really learn. That was the first time I really learned C++. And I was teaching myself, and I was still, underqualified for this job. But at least at this point, I knew that I needed to buckle down and learn this stuff and become good at it. And it's funny, even when I look back then, just now I'm realizing that as I was learning it, there was someone else another developer who was kind of a junior developer who wasn't that strong in C++, and I was teaching what I was learning as I was doing it. And and it was kind of funny because I got this reputation for being a real good developer there, even though I had so little experience and I knew less, because I was so dedicated to learning and sharing what I was learning. It made me appear to be a lot smarter than I actually was, which was a good thing. So anyway, that job worked out really good. I had a good time. I learned a lot. I still was fairly weak in C++, but I was learning and I was getting better, and they were putting me on projects. I felt for the first time like I was actually achieving, like I deserved to be getting what I was doing, because I was working hard and learning, and I worked on, I felt so much pride in the work that I was doing, because I felt like it was meaningful, like I was actually contributing. And September 11th happened, actually, and I remember where I was at the dentist's office, and and I thought it was a hoax. I didn't, it was a very, very tragic day. To this day, I can remember exactly being there. And that was the end of NetCharge. Basically, when those trade towers came down, the financial industry came to a halt. It really crashed hard. And NetCharge, the company I was at, was basically a startup that was based on the financial industry in this business billing. And so the funding got cut off. The market got destroyed. And so here I was stuck again without a job. And this was only like, I'd only been at this job it was less than a year. I don't know, maybe it was 6 months or 8 months. And so I was looking for another job again. But now I made this kind of a dumb decision in my life. And don't ask me why I did this, but I really wanted to move to Florida, where my parents were. I thought that it would be better there and we'd be around some family. And my wife went along with it, and so I took all our stuff, packed it up. I had some savings at that point, and I moved us to Florida. and we stayed with my parents for like 3 months. It was not a good experience for anyone involved. I was newly married at this point. In fact, quick story. I got married when I took this other job at NetCharge in Phoenix. My wedding was like 1 week after I took the job. So I didn't want to say, at the interview, hey, I need to go and get married, and take it, because I didn't want to lose a job. I needed the job. So like in the first couple of days of my work at this new job, I was basically like, hey, could I take like a couple of days off next week? I've got something important. And they're like, well, yeah, it's kind of early, but what is it? Well, I'm getting married. Like, oh, so you want to take off a couple of days to go to your wedding? Like, yeah. Is that all right? And they're like, yeah, of course that's okay. Why didn't you just tell us like before you started? That would have been fine. We were not going to not hire you but anyway, so that was funny. So I'm in Florida, staying with my parents, and it's just crazy. I'm very immature at this point. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I don't have discipline. I don't have, I've learned a little bit about how to program, but it's not. I'm embarrassed, thinking about what kind of things I valued and how I thought it possibly would be a good idea to stay with my parents, with my wife, for 3 months. That's just craziness, right? So, and our pets, right? We had a cat, and I was whatever. Anyway, so I started applying for a bunch of jobs down there, and I wasn't qualified, to be honest with you. I didn't have enough experience. When I did get interviews, I didn't know enough to do really well, and it was frustrating. I flew out. I actually got an interview for Microsoft at that time, and I flew out to Microsoft, and I remember I was just not the interview. I sucked so bad at the interview. It was horrible. I just, here was this exciting opportunity. I wanted to do the best I could, but I did not know enough. I did not have enough depth of knowledge at that point. I was learning. I was trying. But, and I thought I was the bomb at this point, right? I thought I was the shit. I thought I was so awesome, and I wasn't. And I learned it. It was a kind of a humbling experience to go interview at Microsoft and realize that I was not qualified, and I tried my best, but there was no way. They were like, I think they cut their interview short, like they do this half day thing, and I was shipped back. So that was not a fun experience, but it was a necessary one to humble myself a little bit, to learn that I don't know it all, and I need to learn. So anyway, I finally ended up getting this job up in New Jersey, which was somewhere I did not want to go. And it was this small company up there, and it was not, it was a contracting job, and it paid pretty well. Again, I don't know how I was getting these jobs with these high pays, but I think this was somewhere around $40, $50 an hour. It might have been probably like $50 an hour. Anyway, I got this job, started working there. I had a bad attitude about it. My boss there was a micromanager, but I tell you what, I knew that I needed to learn and do well there. And so I buckled down really hard. I started reading every single programming book I could get my hands on. This is where I really learned C++, where I read Effective C++ like 10 times, and Effective SDL and More Effective C++. I still remember those books, right? And I really buckled down and learned and practiced, and I was signed up for Top Coder at topcoder.com, and I was learning there, and I was just committed to, like, I was not going to go through this crap again. I was going to finally, become really good. I was dedicated to it. And I actually even started to build a Palm Pilot application at that time for playing Magic the Gathering. Don't want to go off into too much of the story, but anyway, at that job, one of the first challenges I had was they had this binary format, this code, this binary data that they wanted me to extract images out of. And no one knew what the format of the binary was. So I remember like printing out all these binary like data and looking for patterns, right? This was kind of crazy. It was like, no one's ever figured this out. No one's ever cracked this, but here's your job. And so I remember spending a lot of time, and then all of a sudden, like I started to see this pattern in the binary. I was looking at it in this hex editor, and that's what I was printing out. And I started to see this pattern, and I kind of worked it out. Once I started to see a little bit of a pattern, I realized that there was like headers, and that these headers defined how big the images were. And I don't know how, but miraculously, I wrote the C++ program that was able to go through and parse these binary files, pull out images, and make image files out of them. And I was like this hero. I'd saved this company like millions of dollars literally because of this like thing that no one could crack. And so that was a really cool experience in my career. And it really made me realize that anything was possible if I put my mind to it. So I grew a lot there. It was a very harsh environment. My boss was an extreme micromanager. I had to do a lot of things I didn't want to do. But I committed myself to becoming better. And I remember the day that I got fired from that job, because I did, because I wasn't playing full in. I had problems and I had difficulties. I haven't had difficulties with many people in my career, but I did have difficulties with that manager. And I didn't want to fly to England when we were supposed to do that, because I was like, well, I'm a contractor, what are you gonna pay me for my time? And obviously I should have been. I knew I was going to be out the door, but I remember being happy. It's the only job I think I've ever been fired from that I came home, and I was so excited. I was happy that I had gotten fired from that job, because I just hated that job. I just hated that boss, and I just wanted to be out of there, and I didn't want to be in New Jersey anymore. No offense, I actually kind of miss New Jersey now, but anyway, so that happens. I go back to Florida. And I think I might have, I went back to my parents' house. I know. And then I got this, I started interviewing for jobs again. Still, I could not find a job in Florida for some reason. And then I eventually got a call from an interview with HP, and I actually flew out there once, and I thought I did really good on the interview. Now remember, at this point in my career, I knew my stuff. I was good. I was actually good and hireable, and I was like one of the top coders in C++. So I knew my stuff, and for some reason I thought everything went well, but they gave me this rejection letter. Sorry, we went with another candidate. And then yeah, so it was really devastating actually. And then I kept on applying, and there was this old buddy I had at HP, and he got me into a testing role at HP. And so I'm actually going to leave the story off here, because we're at like 14 minutes here, and I don't want to go too long, especially if you all if you all aren't interested in the story. But if you want to hear more where it goes from there, leave a comment below, leave a thumbs up on here, and I'll do more, or subscribe to the channel if you want to see the next episode in that, and I'll pick up from here if I get enough people that are wanting me to do it. So anyway, that's it for today. Hopefully you've enjoyed this story, and maybe you can benefit from it. I don't have any point in telling you this, except that a lot of people were interested, so I thought I would share it. So anyway, wish you well, and don't forget to subscribe. Take care.